Welcome to Peel and Reveal, the podcast where we share stories about joy, purpose, and self-discovery. I'm Anneli Näs, and in this episode, I'm talking with Tara Meegan, creative director and lead teacher at the Embodied Awakening Academy. Tara's journey of self-discovery began at 21 when she felt a deep calling to explore life's deeper meanings. Balancing her academic achievements in marine biology with a dedicated practice, she spent a decade immersed in ashrams and temples across India and Australia. In 2017, Tara met Chantel Raven, founder of the Embodied Awakening Academy, and discovered the transformative power of Tantra. After experiencing profound healing, she left her career in marine biology to fully dedicate herself to guiding others through the academy. Today, Tara helps people embrace freedom, love, and empowerment through Tantra. I first met Tara earlier this year at a kirtan she led. For those unfamiliar, kirtan is a form of devotional singing from the Indian spiritual tradition. It's a practice of call and response chanting with music that fosters connection and joy. I will explore its power in a future episode. But for now, let's dive into my conversation with Tara and her inspiring journey. Welcome, Tara.
Thank you, darling. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah. So let's start off just with how are you today? How are you feeling?
I'm in the middle of a deep transition, you could say. So It's been eclipse season. I'm a Cancer. There's lots happening with cardinal signs and just generally in my life at the moment. So I'm doing well, and there's a lot of energy moving through my body as well.
Wow. Okay. We have to get back into that. I can kind of relate. I just came back to Stockholm after traveling for 7.5 months. I came back 2 months ago. So, it's some sort of like deep, intense, everything is kind of happening now, meeting everything back to, I guess, integrating my old self with my new self, kind of. So I can relate a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, but
there's a lot of that in the air.
Yeah, exactly. But we're not going to start there. I want to start to hear a bit about the little Tara. Who were you growing up?
So I grew up in Australia, and compared to the rest of the world, had an incredibly privileged upbringing. Healthy, beautiful parents who separated when I was 4. They both remarried. Great education. And yeah, my childhood, like little Tara, was always very interested in things that other people weren't interested in. So I'd ask my mum questions and she's like, I don't know how to answer that. Like, where do people go when they die? And why are there homeless people? Like, why isn't everyone fed and looked after?
Yeah.
So, and it just wasn't a part of my upbringing. Like, my parents weren't religious, so if anything, they were anti, because they kind of did grow up in a Christian upbringing, but not practicing. And yeah, I was pretty kept to myself a lot. Took a while to open to new friends, but just loved everything magical. Loved everything to do with magical realms.
Yeah. Did you have any was it? Oh, this is maybe hard for me to ask because I'm still reconnecting a lot with when I was a childhood. So I have a bit of what was imagination and what was real. Like I'm still sort of kind of figuring that out. But for you, did you have a clear definition of what was real and what was your imagination and like where did the magic come in?
I think it was a blurred line, as I think it is for most children, where, especially if you look at like Rudolf Steiner's education system, that whole education system is geared to keep children's, intuitive and psychic vision open. So I would dare say that a lot of it was real, and through times it's like, oh, but that's not real, or children at school will say that's not real. But it's funny, the more that I've been in the spiritual realms and, out of the mainstream kind of groups of people, the more I'm like, oh, I think a lot of that was actually real, or that was like spirit guides, angels, spirits, all the 5D stuff that's beyond 3D that our entire society is blocking us from connecting to. It's just like what you see is what you get. That's it. Nothing else exists beyond that.
But I'm not familiar with, you said Rupert Spear.
Rudolf Steiner.
Okay. And what was his study? Like, do you want to share a bit short so people?
I've never studied. I've just heard a lot about it. But he created. There's Rudolf Steiner schools all throughout Australia, like all throughout the world, and you can train to be a teacher. And what they do is they really prioritize enhancing a child's will. So they don't start to input information. I think it's anywhere between 7 to 12 years of age.
Wow.
So that child's will to and knowing of themselves can be really solid, really felt, rather than penetrating the mind at ages 5 or below and exams and regurgitating information. It's just like they get to feel themselves in life and learn how to interact with life.
Wow.
Highly recommend for any parents out there to check it out as a schooling. I know a lot of my friends' children who go to Steiner schools, and they're incredible.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a parent yet, but I'm going to check it out anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So a lot of magic in your childhood, and like becoming a teen and your teenage years. How was that?
I was fortunate. I had really beautiful friends. I loved to party. I loved to go to live music. I loved to do all the teenage things, but I had good quality friends. So we partied well, not messily. And, my mum and my stepdad were just it was my house that all the parties were at, or my beach house that all the parties were at. And my parents, my mum and my stepdads who I grew up with, and they were always like, okay, so this is alcohol, try your first drink. So they were very open around that, which meant that I didn't, abuse it like a lot of my friends did as a way of rebelling or avoiding.
Yeah. Interesting. But in your introduction, I hear that your spiritual journey began at when you were 21, which is pretty young. What triggered that? How did you find that interest?
I was finishing my degree in marine ecology. I lived in southern Australia, and I went to northern Australia to study at James Cook University, and was finishing my last few lectures on marine conservation. And it became so apparent to me that we were completely decimating the earth. And this is in 1999. So global warming, all of that stuff wasn't really talked about as much. And it just shocked me to my core. And I realized that the earth doesn't need saving. Actually, human hearts need cultivating. And it's because of our selfishness and greed that we're in this situation. And that put together with a bad LSD trip that was laced with what I now know to be ketamine. But it was one of those scenarios where I went to a festival with kind of new friends, got left at the festival because they wanted to leave. And it just threw me into the most intense paranoia. It was boom. And I woke up the next day just second guessing everything that I was saying, to the point that I sold everything, hopped in my car, and had to just leave society.
Wow.
And I went to the Daintree rainforest because I met some guy in a crystal store, and he said there's this great rainforest area with community that might help you. And it's north of Cairns, maybe 3-4 hours north of Cairns, near Cape Tribulation. The most stunning rainforest, magical, exotic. And I spent 4 months there, pretty much living in abandoned shacks in the middle of the jungle, and doing a lot of water fasting, or just eating fruit that I had in my little river that was kept fresh. And it's where I started to go, what is the meaning of life? And is there a God? And if so, what is that? And what is the deal with my troubled relationship with my dad and my stepmom that causes me so much angst and has since I was a child. And I just started writing letters to them. And that really opened me to the spiritual path, and I couldn't turn back from it from there. But it was, it was massive depression, massive anxiety. I was at the lowest I'd been in my life. And probably the lowest that I've been. There's been a few close similarities, but it's what, like, spirit was just there every step of the way, looking after me, bringing me the people who would feed me, the information. And very soon I ended up back in Adelaide with my family, and was bartending somewhere. And this woman said to me, "Have you heard of Amachi, the hugging mother? Mata Amritananda Mai in Kerala?" And I'm like, "No, don't even know what that means." She's like, "Well, she's like a spiritual person, and she's going to be in Melbourne this weekend." And my whole body went, "I need to go." And I'm sitting there. Do you know Amachi, the hugging mother?
Nope. You have to tell me about her as well.
She has a massive ashram in Kerala. You'll come across her at some stage. She hugs, like, I've watched her hug 18,000 people a day.
Oh my God.
And when my mum finally went to meet her to see what this spiritual stuff was about, she just bawled her eyes out after getting a hug and was like, "Such unconditional love." I'm like, yeah. So it was meeting that and a spiritual teacher, guru. I had no concept of that. And then someone there said, "I guess she's kind of like Jesus, an awakened master who's on the planet." And it just, like, I was a sponge. I don't think my sponge has ever, it's chilled out a bit now, but I'm like, let me know everything. And it just activated this part of myself that has never turned off. And if anything, it just expands as my life now.
But wow, but there is so many things that you've already said now that I kind of want to tie on before we kind of get together. So first of all, I loved how you described that, you didn't use these words in particular, but that, like, we're very focused on sustainability now, and like conservation and like the I'm trying to find the English words here, but when it comes to the environmental questions and stuff, but most of it is like connected to our broken hearts. Like that's what makes us, kill things from the beginning, kind of. Like, how did you make that connection using your own words? Because you were quite young then.
I've got no idea. I think it was one of those soul awakenings that happened, and then linked with my own suffering that was going on, and just starting. What the big thing was, though, is my dad, which is where my greatest trauma has been, or pain has been, that's led me on this path. Actually, part of the difficulty with that relationship is when he left when I was 4 and my brother was 2. He was physically and emotionally absent because he was one of the world-leading experts in global warming when it came to environmental law. He's an environmental lawyer, and he dedicated his whole life working non-stop on this for very good reasons, and also because, of his parents and what his conditioning was to, like, that was his way for freedom. So the thing that kind of caused the greatest pain in my life and in my brother's life was linked to his abandonment, emotional and physical abandonment. Yet it's the thing that I connected to, and I actually called up my dad and was like, "Is this what you do for a job? Like, is this any way linked?" Because I didn't really know much about what he did. And it's so ironic because you fast forward now and he's trying to finish writing. He's been writing for 6 years since he retired his final book on the earth and how to save humanity. And, it's really sad. He's just been in massive, in quite serious depression and just grief, because he's like, there's nothing I can do to stop this, because humans will not change. And it all comes down to this human selfishness that doesn't see long term, that isn't connected to the earth, and everyone's just bouncing ego off of ego and wanting more, and we're not actually thinking beyond our own desires.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's funny because then I'm like, well, that's what I help people to do. That's my job, is I help people is to clear the parts of their ego that are keeping them stuck in harmful patterns in their own body, in their relationships, and in the earth, in the world around them, you know. And the people who I see having the most minimal impact on the planet are the people who are like constantly evolving their own being, because you can't not care for the earth and make changes in that direction if you're caring for yourself. We're of the earth. They're so inextricably linked.
Yeah.
So
Very,
maybe
very
to
true.
answer your question, karma, like, you know,
Yeah. Or is it
the
everything?
alignment, family dynamics.
Yeah, yeah. Out of curiosity, does your dad realize that now, that that is what you do, and that that path might be the way to save it? Does he acknowledge it?
It's interesting. It's a great question. Like, just in the last, I'd say, year or more during COVID, we started to have conversations, and we're now actually starting for the first time to have regular conversations about this all. And I think in a way, yeah, like, I understand him, and I'm genuinely, like, I'm just so interested in what he does, because, you know, at the summary of his book is, it's all about communities, the way that humanity is going to survive. We need to break down, go back to basics and smaller communities of, what did he call it? CPR, communities of persistent resilience. And that's what it's going to take. And
Yeah.
I very much agree with him, you know, with living in Bali and the communities around the world. That's what we're all aware of. And we're all like, let's buy land. Let's have our own, you know, energy source, water source, food supply. Probably a good idea the way the world's going.
Yeah.
So we meet in this place, you know, where other people are like, you guys are wax. I'm like, not in our circles.
Yeah. But that's beautiful that you're like coming to the same conclusion, but from very different paths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing that you said that I kind of like caught on was because you describe your childhood as very, you know, privileged, and the way you use your word makes me feel that it was a very beautiful childhood. And then you also mentioned this kind of drama with your dad that seems to have always been there. Like, how have you learned to kind of view it like that? Did you always view it like that? Because I guess it is a choice what you choose to kind of like
Yeah.
empathize on.
You ask great questions. Yeah.
I'm trying to listen.
Yeah. It's a really important definition, because, like, you know, I've been on the spiritual path, and I've been through immense amount of inner work and relationship suffering because of my abandonment wound. And even though it's fascinating, even though I had an amazing stepdad, it doesn't touch the abandonment wound. It actually supports in other ways, but not that. And so from that perspective, there's been, you know, I've had to let myself feel my victim, my inner victim, my inner shadow, and do shadow work with that. And yeah, it was quite disturbing then, the dynamic with my stepmom, and just all of the shit for, you know, years that happened in that dynamic, and not really growing up knowing my dad, or ever feeling really loved or cared for. And that's massively impacted my relationships. And it's what's made me into the woman I am today. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. The perspective shift on having a privileged upbringing is something I'm really practicing in my life now, which is mindset, which is, even though, you know, like, all these parts of my life are dissolving right now, and my nervous system's like maxed out with all the non-attachment that I'm having to hold in relationship, in work, in money, in house, in future, like, you name it. I'm in that like burning portal of dissolution, which can come for me every few years when there's big jumps and leaps of faith. And look, I live in Bali. I have amazing friends. I get to eat super yummy, healthy food. I'm about to go to Mexico and then Costa Rica on a holiday. Like, Jesus, you know, first world problems.
Yeah.
But they're real. So it's not to discount it, but it's to go, just by being born in Australia, I'm probably in the top 10%, you know, to be born in a Western country. We're so fucking privileged compared to what being born in Africa, in the Middle East, and the more clients that I work with from around the world, the more I'm like, I have nothing to complain about. I do not know what suppression of the feminine is like compared to, these two amazing women who I just did a private immersion with from Qatar, and what they've had to go through to protect themselves and protect their children and completely pull them out of the system. So that's where I think that perspective is really important.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Another thing that you mentioned, and this is me a bit grasping, so say if I'm wrong, but I mean, a person who is 21 and almost finishing her marine biology education, that's kind of a person being like very, goal oriented, know what she wants and stuff, and to just leave all of that and moving to the jungle seems like not a very big like personality shift. Like, am I right, or am I?
Well, yeah. So the missing part of that story is like literally within the week I finished my degree, I knew for sure I didn't want to be a marine ecologist. I wanted to work with people.
Okay.
And so I spoke to my dad, and this was one of the calls that I have with him where he's just, and he gave me great advice. And he said, look, you've done your degree. You're really good at it. Why don't you get a job? Because you're really qualified now, and, pursue this passion of working with people and, going on this spiritual journey in your spare time. So I went and lost my mind in the Daintree and then made my way back to Adelaide, and then just started volunteering at a marine conservation institute that my dad had connections with. So I still cared about the earth and I needed something to do.
Yeah.
And then from there I got an honours scholarship. So I'm like, all right, I guess I'll do that. And then I finished that, and then I got a PhD scholarship. And at that point I'm like, oh God, do I really have to? And Amma happened to have flown into Adelaide for the only time she's been to Adelaide right as I got the scholarship. And so I went and saw her with like tens of thousands of people. You get a hug. My mum got a hug. She cried. And you can line up and ask her a question.
Okay.
And I said, Amma, I've got this PhD scholarship. I don't want to do it. I want to work with people. And she's like, you've got to do the PhD.
Oh.
And, if you ask from an enlightened master, you listen. So I listened.
Yeah.
And then 2/3 of the way through, I had an experiment that was running for a year underwater on this offshore island that we worked on. And the day before I went to pull it up, this freak storm just came and destroyed everything. And I lost a year's worth of data in a 3-year PhD. And my supervisor and I were like, I'm just going to have to write it up as a master's. There's no way I can do a PhD. So I put in the paperwork, and my then husband was like, hey, Amma's going to be, this is like, fast forward 3 years, Amma's going to be in Melbourne. Let's go see us. We went and saw Amma. Years later, and I'm like lining up to ask my question, and I've written her this letter, and I'm like, oh, poor me, my thing got destroyed. I can't do it. I have to write it up as a master's. And she's like, I understand. Oh, that's really hard. And she said, but you must finish your PhD. All you need to do is put in your best effort, and I'll help you get the data that you need.
Okay.
I'm like, fuck. So I had to go back to Adelaide to my supervisor and go, so this Indian guru said that, if I do my best effort, she'll help me get the data. Can I finish my PhD? Like, I'm a devotee. I'm a very good student. Yeah. And he turns around to me and says, you know what? If she believes you can do it, I believe you can do it. Let's finish this PhD.
Wow. So you had both worlds supporting you.
I had both worlds coming together. Yeah. And then this Viking dude just shows up who's like a mad diver. I almost lost a toe to hypothermia, because it was so cold in Adelaide and sharky. But I somehow got all the data that I needed. And the 2 years of data that I did have, became like citation classics, and I had a 6-chapter PhD, most are 4 to 5, and all of them were published. And it's kind of unheard of. And like, I know that I did it, but then part of me was like, Jesus, like, I don't even know how I did that.
I got the chills now.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
looking back at it now with some perspective, do you know why you needed to do the PhD now? Yeah.
Because then fast forward, I mean, with my studies until when I left, it was a 17-year career as a marine ecologist and statistician. And I went kicking and screaming, unfortunately. I wasn't listening to my body. I wasn't listening to the signs of the universe. I gave myself a heart condition and needed to have like a heart operation. I gave myself repetitive strain injury, was on workers' compensation for 4 years in like the most horrendous of pain, couldn't tie my shoelaces. My second husband had to like feed me. But I was like, no, I'm going to fix this so I can keep working at a computer as a marine ecologist. Even though Tantra had started to come into my life. And that was the next biggest ego death in my life, was leaving that job. And again, I got pushed. I didn't ballerina leap off the cliff. You know, I had to have heart condition, this horrendous injury. And to be honest, I was driving one day back from my lawyers for the work injury claim and just saw this huge gum tree and just thought, if I drive into that, everything will be more simple for everyone. And I'm like, whoa, Tara. Turned around, went straight to my mentor's house, had a 3-hour bodywork session from here, Raven, who I run the academy with. And drove from that session to work and resigned that day. And like 3 days later, had a dream about the academy, phoned Raven, said, hey, I want to support in some way. And she was like, yeah, in my meditation a month ago, Spirit said you'd be running the academy with me. So I don't know how we're going to do that because you can't use a computer for more than 10 minutes an hour. But I just started to get sessions with her like every week. And just through all of the embodiment of that work, I shifted the pain in my body that in 4 years of working with the top pain psychologists and therapists didn't even nearly touch, and healed myself of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now we got into Tantra a bit. So like, what was your first introduction to Tantra and how did it come into your life?
So I was on I was managing a whale migration project like up in northern Queensland, going into my little room, and I was on Facebook and I saw Tantric Women's Circle. And I'd never experienced any Tantra, and I just thought, I have to be there. I don't know what it is, but I have to be there. And when I went, there was Raven, maybe 6 other women in the room, and her 8-year-old daughter at the time. And she was talking about relationships and lovemaking and the importance of breast massage and the importance of breathing and sounding into your body. And I'm just like, this is the missing piece for me. You know, the bit that I missed is that after my honors degree, I did have a pause and I went to India for the first time. And that started my love relationship with India. And for 10 years when I was working in my career, I just negotiated, 3 months leave a year so that I could spend it in India. Oh, wow. And then once I did a 6-month trip, and then once I actually resigned from my job and went and lived in India for 2 years, my husband and I were like, yeah, let's try living here. Got my job back after 2 years, and I was like, okay. It was just so intense. India was so intense. Bali's like a beautiful version of India.
Okay, yeah.
So I had that relationship. With India kind of alongside my mainstream work. And in that 10 years of like living in ashrams in India, there was something missing. There was always something missing because my relationship was really unhealthy, right? There was an unhealthy, toxic dynamic to it and I couldn't speak up for myself. I was just like a very subservient wife, very, very subservient wife. And when I met Tantra, it's like expression, trusting your body, communicating your truth, emotionally processing before you do that. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what should be taught in schools. And I drove home with this word repeating in my head going, such integrity, such integrity, such integrity. And what blew me away by Raven, Chantel Raven, I call her Raven, is that I could see that she was living it from her being. And I've got a good eye for it because I've sat with many teachers who don't live it. And I was sick of it. I was so sick of it. And then I'm seeing her daughter, who's just the living, breathing embodiment of it because she's growing up with it. And I'm like, finally. And she's a female teacher who's like powerhouse. So that's kind of how I found Tantra. And the first time I sat with her, I'm like, yeah, this is my path.
Oh, wow.
And so just dove in. Every holiday, everything was about doing the retreats. Everything was about attending every event possible. And my husband joined me. And so him and I are like, yeah, this is it. Let's do this.
Wow, that's beautiful. I wanna talk more about the Tantra, but I also realize I don't want to miss the 10 years in India. So let's jump there a little bit and then reconnect to the Tantra. I guess, or now I'm also guessing, but that the hugging mother, was she the one to introduce you to India, or like how did your path to India start?
She was. I just finished my honors and just handed it up, and I went to an Amma Kirtan. And I'm a gathering where they were singing devotional music. And I remember afterwards we were just like having cups of tea, and this guy Barry, who was the husband of one of the women, he would have been like 70 something, he goes to me, you know, Amma's bringing together people around the world to go to India because there were all these earthquakes in Gujarat in 2020. And the people who didn't get aid, who were like really far out, from the city centers, she's supporting them. You know, she's doing an aid run. He said, I just felt like asking you, do you want to come to India? Like, a typical statistician answer. I turned to him and I said, I am 99% sure I'm coming. It was so known in my body. And I just knew that I had to do Vipassana, have that experience, and then I was ready for India. And like as soon as I landed in India, I literally said the words, I'm home.
Wow.
It's so weird. All the Indians say to me, you're a reverse coconut. You're white on the outside, brown on the inside. Indian on the inside.
I love that. I love that. And like, what did you study and what did you learn in India? Like, I mean, 10 years of studies is hard to, summarize, but if you would try to.
Yeah. So I met my first husband at an Amma retreat, but he was actually a Sai Baba devotee who...
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's another Indian guru. He's passed now, but he has a big afro, orange robes, and is an awake being whose ashram is huge. So he took me there, and that's where I really learnt kirtan. And what really got me into the Sai Baba community was the song. This kirtan was just like pumping and activating and alive. The Amma songs were like, you-do-do-do-do, and I'm like, oh. Whereas the Sai Babas were very like powerful. Okay. And I loved his teachings that all religions are one and love all, serve all is what he teaches. So we lived in his ashram for 10 years on and off, and then we just traveled all around India visiting like Rishikesh, and I really wish I took note of where I went because I have no idea. But we covered a lot of India, but would always come back to the ashram. And I just spent my days in like meditation, in singing, in service projects, and in working with an orphanage of these children who were street kids who had like alcoholic parents or no parents. And then I was teaching year 10, 11 and 12 maths, science and biology. Oh, wow. Which was really hard. I had to study to be able to teach, and they were like sponges. You know, they've had no formal education, but this American couple feed them, house them, clothe them, and teach them, you know, so that they're all homeschooled and can have an education from people who want to help. Yeah, so it was amazing. I loved it. And then I also ghost wrote my ex-husband's book while we were traveling for 2 years together there.
All right. But wow, so it was more like, I think when I imagined it, when I just heard that you spend that much time, I imagined all of it almost being meditation, but you were really like part of the community, like helping out and like living their lifestyle a bit.
Absolutely. Meditation was a small part of it. Really, it's like you come and you sit in the mandir, which is the big hall, which holds 10,000 people, and you wait for Sai Baba to come out. And there's, you know, world-class musicians playing kirtan. He can take an hour to come out. He can take 4 hours to come out. And that happens twice a day. So twice a day, you're stuck in this hall in this beautiful sari, because I love saris, you know, like singing kirtan and being in that meditative state at the same time. And then working, like my ex-husband, he worked in the hospital. So there was always a lot to do.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds amazing. I also have to, you have to say if you don't want to share this, but you're mentioning a first husband and a second husband. How were the relationships like? And
So first husband I met at 23. He was Sri Lankan. It was a very spiritual connection. And again, I was a sponge, just being like, teach me, teach me. And that was 10 years, a 10-year relationship. And it was so devotional and so beautiful. And even after 10 years, I'd come home from work and we'd both just be like, like so excited to see each other. And there was a lot of control and suppression because, you know, I put myself beneath him. He put himself above me. And so I just didn't have a voice in the relationship and couldn't communicate what I needed, what I wanted. And wasn't allowed to speak up. Otherwise, he'd threatened to end the marriage. So it was quite an extreme polarity.
On both worlds, yeah.
Yeah. And then when I left that marriage 4 years later, I met my second husband, who I worked with as a marine ecologist, and we were together for 7 years. That ended the first year of COVID. And it was a beautiful marriage, but both of them were incompatible within the first 3 months. But I didn't see the signs and I didn't listen. And that's been my journey with Tantra and with relationships is, seeing, is this compatible or not? And is this going to work? It's not that we don't love each other. It's just depending on our upbringing, our beliefs, our capacity. Some relationships are just not compatible.
Yeah. So if you would teach someone that you learned after, or that you now can see after 3 months, what is that? How do you know if you're compatible?
So there's two ways of looking at it. One is structure, and I'll speak that way, and the other one's more of a feminine approach. And the structured approach is like, from the philosophy of Tantra, is that to be compatible, you need to be a yes at the animal. Like you need to love your man's cock. You need to like find him sexy. You need to, you know, like and really enjoy the sex as well. Doesn't mean that everything has to be perfect, but there's natural chemistry there. And you're both aligned in how you make love. So for me, I need someone who's energetic and mystical as well as primal. Right. So there needs to be an alignment there, and who likes to make love for hours and often. So that's what I need.
Yeah.
And then, so that's the animal, the first center. The second center is the heart. And the heart space is like, you need to feel that you're cared for by this person, that you care for them, that you feel safe to be yourself, that you can communicate healthily when stuff comes up. That you can have fun together and also be best friends. So that's that heart, and that you feel chosen. You know, it's the biggest one for the feminine in men and women is, do I feel chosen?
Yeah.
And then the third one is consciousness. And consciousness is a bit more hard to describe, but it's more around your values, your life path, children, no children, country you want to live in. For me, the main consciousness piece is that my partner really needs to be on the path of Tantra. I've tried otherwise and it just doesn't work. It's like my nature, it's my being.
Yeah.
And doesn't want to have children because I've decided not to have children in this life. So that's kind of through the structure, how you can look at compatibility.
Yeah, yeah.
And the other thing is, now I'm really clear on what my non-negotiables are in relationship, and it's a really good idea to write these down. And I kind of write them down from many perspectives, but then I just boil it down to animal, heart, and consciousness, and what are the non-negotiables there. And then that's my accountability to myself.
Yeah.
So that if the animal center is like, oh my God, here's the one, this is amazing, but he's not choosing me, I'm like, hang on a second. This is not going to work. You know, this is your non-negotiable. This is your accountability to yourself. And the more abstract part of it is your body always knows. Your body is either open and expanded and having a good time, or it's contracted, feeling fear, and there's drama. And yes, that can be to do with our past. Right? And the blockages that we need to work through, our abandonment wound or our enmeshment wound. But I've come to realize that it's also really largely to do with the person that you're in relationship. And usually if the abandonment wound's really active, which it was for me, then I would attract people who are really avoidant.
Okay.
But given that that's the case, what I would do is stay in that relationship because I'm like, no, I've got an abandonment wound. I have to keep working on this. I have to keep working on this, which is true to one degree. But on the other side, it's like we're also as needy as our unmet needs. So I think there's always two sides to a situation that we've got to constantly be looking at. One is the inner world of what's happening there, and the other one is the outer world and what's happening there. And that's what I'm getting really good at feeling and just trusting my body, which my body knew within the first 3 months in every relationship I've been in. But I haven't listened because I'm in love with potential, or I'm too scared to even look at it, or the thoughts of, oh, this is as good as it gets, are too strong, whatever it's been. But with Tantra, that process is sped up incredibly. In fact, like uncoupling in relationships has been my biggest growth potential since COVID, when my second marriage ended. And the relationships that I've been in since then, I've learned so much from every relationship, and so much from the breakup or the free up process in that. And I think it's a shame that we're not taught how to do that. It's such a key part of life when a relationship's dying and dissolving, of how to do that with grace so that we can actually harvest the fruits of what it's showing us and the reflections that it's showing us. It's a fast track to do that.
Yeah. Someone told me, and I found that very beautiful to also have in mind, that breaking up doesn't mean that the relationship was bad. It's if you're like staying in a relationship that's bad, that's the bad relationship. Like breaking up is maybe part of your development or your path or all of that, but you can make that beautiful.
Absolutely. And I see a lot of people staying in relationship when, you know, from the outside, it's just, there's such obvious incompatibility. And it's a session that I do with couples, actually. It's the first session I do with a lot of couples who come to work with me, is, are you compatible? You know, and then both,
like, no, we're not.
well, it's happened. It's happened. You know, often there is, it's like, well, this is what I need. This is my non-negotiable. And they're both like, yep, I can work on that. Yep, I can work on that. But sometimes there's one where the partner's like, I can't do that. No, that's never going to change in me. And the relationship, and then, you know, they're like, what do we do now? And I'm like, there's nothing to do. Like you're going to be miserable as long as you're staying, because this neither of you can agree on that, and neither of you are going to budge because that's your truth, and that's fair enough. You're just not compatible. And then actually it was this woman who's now a friend of mine. I saw her yesterday, and she was telling a group of friends. It was like, and then 2 days after Tara said that to me, I met my partner, who I'm now having a child with. Because she was so brave to leave that massive marriage, and it had been a while that it had been troublesome.
Yeah. Wow. And I guess this is part of getting into the Tantra questions. But like, when you say that your body knows, how do you know that your body knows? Like, how does it feel? How do you describe it?
Contraction. It feels like shit. It feels like, oh, I don't feel safe, or like, oh, you get that pinch in the heart that you may not catch straight away. And if I don't catch it straight away, I mostly do. But if I don't, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and then I'll be like, and the thoughts will come in. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that impacted me so much. So that's why with Tantra, having a daily practice is how to teach people to be connected to their bodies, because the body, as long as it's not in a stress response, the body is telling us at any moment what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And that's the starting point. Something is feeling not good in my body right now. Instead of suppressing that or distracting myself from it, I'm going to sit with that and do a process to let myself actually feel that contraction, even though it may be completely unreasonable, so that I can see what's underneath it. And maybe what's underneath it is something to do with my past that I need to clear. So I'm going to do that first so that I can be self-responsible. And then I'm going to come back and look at the current situation and go, okay, what is it that I'm needing actually? Or what boundary do I need to set? Or what need do I need to fulfill myself?
All right. So I have had this pattern. I'm using myself as an example here, because maybe you have seen this before. So I've had this pattern lately that I'm getting a few signs from the universe. Like, the universe is pointing me in the direction. And it's like it's uncovering something. And when I see that, it's so clear and it's so powerful that like my entire being is like pushing it away. And I don't really know, like, I understand that I need to make a change. That is so clear. There is like no negotiable. But the physical reaction is so powerful that I don't really know how to like be normal in it. Yeah.
So that's, when I teach Tantra workshops or do one-on-one Tantra sessions, all I'm doing is holding space for individuals to sit in that feeling and let yourself feel it. So if you got off the podcast, maybe there were more tears, and let yourself feel what that is. Because if you're finally being seen by this person, there's probably a much deeper grief in your body of where you haven't been seen, and all the work that you've poured out for years without feeling respected and seen, And you need, and if you let yourself feel that and you give it expression, like, this is the biggest piece, is to give it expression, because all of our throat chakras are in some way locked down. We live in a society that is programmed to do that and is doing a very good job. So it's really important to activate sound, and that would look like putting someone before you visually in your business and just saying exactly how you feel. Doesn't mean you would have that conversation with them, but you give these parts of ourselves that we keep constricted and we keep hidden full free expression. And you use express and release techniques, whether you want to punch pillows, whether you want to chuck a tantrum, whether you want to cry, shake, to see what's beneath that. And that's how you access the unconscious, is always with breath, sound, and movement. And just letting it be there, whatever you're feeling. Same with the anger. Go beat the shit out of some cushions and see whose face turns up and see what you want to say. And maybe it's to do with that person, or maybe it goes back to childhood.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess in a way, when I've been on the path before, I've had so much time to like have the space for those feelings, and now coming back into like normal world, I haven't really taken the space. So that's why it's coming up in situations that are maybe not
exactly
open for it.
Yeah, and that's why daily practice is so important. It's like we shower every day, we brush our teeth every day.
Yeah.
So we have physical hygiene, but we don't have emotional hygiene. And our inner emotional world is the perception from which we experience life. So it affects everything. So it affects how we run our businesses. It affects how we feel about ourselves. It affects our romantic relationships. And, you know, it's just not prioritized because it hasn't been taught unless you go to a Steiner school. Those kids are really good at it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, and there's a reason. There's a reason that there's massive emotional suppression and suppression of sexuality across the planet, because if we're not feeling our emotions, then we can be controlled. If we are feeling our emotions, we wouldn't put up with half the shit that's going on in the world or half the shit that goes on in our personal relationships. And the same with our sexuality, because we're in full openness and pleasure, moving life force energy through our body, the body that creates, and the act of sex that creates life on this planet. Like, what more powerful energy is there? So that's why Tantra is becoming bigger and bigger, thankfully, is because people are going, just the meditation in itself isn't working. You know, just the mindfulness in itself isn't working. We need to look at the emotional body and we need to look at the sexual body, because they're the two energies on the planet that I would say are most in shadow and causing war. Don't beat a cushion. Don't bring your army into invading another country, you know, like there's just there's so much impact from that.
So what you're a pro at this, so what would you like, can you share both like what you would recommend as a daily practice for someone who is newer, and then also share what you are doing? So
my go-to and what I share with my clients and students is, it's called Ignite Your Power Daily Practice. And you can find it on Chantel Raven's playlist. And there's 5 songs. And the first song is Shaking. And it's we're going back to what we used to do as children and as primates as well. And you're just shaking with sound. So if you just take 10 seconds now and take a deep breath in, shake the body and let out an ah, and close down the eyes. And just stay with that for 10 seconds. Breathe in. Ah, 2 more of these. One more deep breath. And as you do that, you're circulating breath, sound, and movement. So your attention is coming off the external onto the internal. And that is the premise of Tantra. So the first song is shaking. So I would say every day shake. Release the tension that's in the body, fear, essentially. And then the next track is meditation. And meditation is key because you don't want to become your thoughts. You want to observe your thoughts and also observe the emotional body. So then you're in meditation. And then the third practice is Kundalini breath practice, or breath of fire practice. So you could do alternate nostril breathing. You can do Kapalabhati, breath of fire, but some type of breathwork practice where you're activating. And then the fourth song is a song just to connect to the emotional body. So you place a hand on your heart. You can do that now. You place a hand on your belly, which are the 2 emotional centers. And you just bring some gentle movement through the spine, breathing in, letting out some sound, breath, sound, and movement. And if you're feeling sadness, pain, frustration, fear, this is it. Breath, sound, and movement with a spinal wave. And maybe there's tears, but it's that self-love, self-nurture of coming back to self. And then the 5th and final song is to dance. And this is where emotional mastery comes in. So you're letting release the fear. You're observing the mind. you're charging and activating with a breathwork practice, and then you're feeling into the vulnerability of the emotional body. And then you're like, okay, now I'm going to shift into joy. I got a day to go on with. And this is where you can vision your day ahead as you see it, what is it you're desiring and manifesting, and like pump those positive thoughts and vibes into that space.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, I'm going to try that one.
Yeah, and it only needs to be 30 minutes. You know, but it's really important. I think it's really important to train ourselves to go within rather than to externalize through having a daily practice that you're consistent with. So I do that a lot of the time, just in different ways and different formats, because I've got a lot of tools up my sleeve now.
Yeah. You said that a little bit earlier in the conversation, you said that like when you found Tantra, it was the missing piece from what you've had in India. And from what you said now, I kind of gathered that a lot of in India was about the meditation and maybe the breath work. And then you got more connected to the emotional body and the sexuality through Tantra. Is that?
Yeah, I found that a lot of that more Vedic kind of tradition, it's very much about being the witnesser. It's very much a masculine approach of being the observer, of dedication to service, of prayer, of mantra, of yantra. So very much going up to connection with spirit. And I'm so grateful for that period in my life, because it did give me such a strong connection with spirit and unseen realms. But because it was so polarized here, you know, they never talked about sex. They barely talked about relationships, and there was no talk about the expression of the emotional body. So when we're polarized in the light, then the darker energies, the emotional body, the sexual body, dark doesn't mean bad. Dark doesn't mean shadow. It just means the opposite of light, right? Then those more lower chakras can go into shadow, and that's what I would see in a lot of those spaces. So when I met Tantra and I saw both being combined, like acknowledging the upper chakras and also acknowledging the base and the lower chakras, I'm like, wow, this is it. This is what it means to be human. And that's what Tantra is, that to get to divinity, we don't just pray or, you know, connect. We go into duality to go beyond duality into divinity. Because why not? We're human. We're in these human flesh suits. We're not in 5D realms. We're very, very 3D physical beings. And we have thoughts and we have emotions and we have sex drives. And so for me, Tantra is mastery of the human experience that goes, so how do we do that consciously? And what's it all about? And how can we actually remember the truth of who we are through these bodies, through our emotions, through our sexuality, through our awareness, and through our connection with the world around us?
Wow.
That's the fun spot to be exploring.
Yeah. And how do you do that? How has your practice with Tantra been for the last, since you found it until now?
So I guess how you do it is to stop resisting whatever your experience is.
Okay.
So the majority of suffering is because we're resisting something that's coming up within ourselves or something that's coming up in our external world. And it comes back to a resistance to feel pain, because we've been conditioned by well-meaning parents and, you know, a global society to take the quick fix, take the pill, don't worry about exercising, don't worry about looking after your body and health, just take a tablet. You know, like we're programmed to resist pain. So it's really deep. It's really deep in us all. And Tantra for me is the repatterning of that, to say that actually pain and pleasure are both just us having an experience that's linked to a sensation in our bodies. And the two are inextricably linked. So if we're resisting feeling painful sensations in our body, like heartache, like frustration, like rage, like fear, to do with the experiencing that we're having, then we're having to numb ourselves. We're having to suppress a part of ourselves. And so when we do that with those challenging experiences and sensations, we're doing it to the emotional body, to the feeling body. So what also gets suppressed is our pleasure body and our ability to be with our experience and the sensation in our body when we're in a state of pleasure. And that was a huge revelation for me when I realized that I equally resisted pleasure, and that it got scary, and I'd be like, find a way to sabotage, or, whatever it is. So just imagine if in your life right now, and for anyone listening, you just let go of resistance to whatever it is that you were feeling and just allowed yourself to feel it. Maybe it's that you hate someone, or you're frustrated. Maybe it's that you're sad. Maybe it's that you're scared, and you actually let your nervous system do what it is required of it to do, which is to vibrate it through the body and release it from the nervous system, rather than swallowing it, pushing it down, and then it stays there as this low-level anxiety, depression, fear that's in the background for so many people, because we're not feeling it.
Yeah.
And that's the going into duality, is to let ourselves fit. And the more that we do that, the more that our bodies open, the more that our energy channels open, the more that our pleasure receptors open, and the more that we can actually expand our nervous system's capacity to hold and be with pain, and to hold and be with pleasure. So for me, Tantra is a nervous system expansion path, if you want to break it down that way.
Yeah.
That, I'm getting very close now in my own evolution to really be able to genuinely say to myself, no matter what comes up in my life, if I lose it all, I have got you, I am here, and we've got this. Whereas I used to abandon myself with alcohol, with weed, with TV, with food, with 17-year addiction to codeine. Like, I was the biggest addict to not feel my pain. And so that relationship with self has come like a monumental way since Tantra.
Yeah. Wow. One of the things you said now, it stuck with me a bit more, because I think at least I think many others have experienced that, when you're starting to feel so much pleasure that you self-sabotage. Like, can you describe a bit more how you worked with that, or how you're working with people who have that?
I guess for me, it's showing up in my life with not giving myself spaciousness to play and have fun. I would always work, or relationship cave. And so, yeah, like opening to pleasure is opening to relaxation and letting the nervous system downshift. It's opening to, I'm going to take the weekend off or a week off and go hang out with these new friends or do something for myself. I'm going to prioritize actually pleasure. And it's such a game changer. And it's now how, a lot of what the Academy's teachings are about is really about aligning to that heart feeling, soul yearning for whatever it is that you desire, which in some form is pleasure or alignment. And when you follow that, and you follow what lights you up, and you follow what feels good, and you stop tolerating in relationships or work dynamics that make you feel contracted and shut down and tense, then you keep aligning to your truth. So it kind of ties together you need to be connected to your body and connected to your emotions and feelings. Otherwise, you'll just suppress it all and stay stuck in a job or relationship that isn't serving you. Whereas if you're allowing yourself to feel it all, then you're like, this isn't worth it. It's not lighting me up. So can I be brave enough to leave and love myself enough and think and feel that I'm worthy enough of looking for a new job, of actually dissolving a relationship, because being with self, where I'm loving and looking after myself, is far more valuable than being in a relationship that isn't loving me in the way that I need to be loved.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You kind of like touched upon it now anyways, but I was gonna also say, like, because I do see that we are so afraid of all the bad feelings, of all the pain, of all the anxiety, and like all those things as well. And I think that I think we've forgotten what they are. For me, they are kind of signals. They're telling us something, that we might need to do that change and stuff. But how do you work with people who don't see it that way? Or like, how do you encourage people who feel that they maybe are stuck in something that they cannot change, to kind of get the courage and to kind of dare to listen to those signals?
I mean, that's why people come to workshop spaces and work in one-on-one containers with me for 3 to 9 months, because I'm holding space for them and I'm guiding them through a process of tuning into their body, bringing all their attention inward, and teaching them how to hold space for themselves and teaching them how to emotionally process. And that's how I learned. I learned in retreat spaces, and I learned getting one-on-one sessions for like 1 year periods in my life, just to go to that next level of being able to access the unconscious, which is where the healing work really is. So seek a mentor whose life you're like, I would want that life, and then it's the modality for you, not just it sounds good what their teachings are, but the teacher themselves. Would you want their life? Is it something that inspires you? And then if so, it's like we learn through imitation and we learn through transmission. So that's why being in someone's space guided by them, you get to receive both the transmission from them, but you actually get to be guided by them of how to hold your emotional body. And in Tantra, all I'm ever doing is bringing in my masculine to hold space for someone's emotional body, to create that safety, witnessing without judgment and observing. And then I'm bringing in my feminine to validate their experience, because it's always fair enough, the people who sit before me, what they're feeling, and then just help them to love that part and let go of resistance. And right there, with the presence of the masculine and the love of the feminine, is the foundation of safety, which is loving presence. So I'm holding loving presence for them, but I'm getting them to do it in their own body. And once there's that loving presence, then, people who haven't been able to cry for years, then they're like, oh my God, I haven't cried in years. Or, oh, I've never been able to express anger. Or, oh, I didn't realize that I felt this way. And then I get them to do, there's a whole range. Like a practitioner training is an 18-month training full of all the different ways that you can emotionally process and access the unconscious, depending on what part of the human experience you're working through. So I'm just using all of the tools from the training that I implement in my life with other people.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. I think, like, talking to you now, I do realize, I think Tantra is missing in Sweden. I'm going to start finishing off by asking, is there anything I should have asked you about that I haven't asked you about?
No, I loved your questions. I loved your questions about what it is to feel the emotional body, to be with the body, and what's the first step to doing that with the daily practice.
Good. Yeah. Good. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, which is kind of tying up now to where we started when I asked you how you are, like, what are you working on with yourself right now? And I think you also mentioned that you had like a few ego deaths, and then you said that there was something big coming on now. Are you heading to another ego death, or what's going on?
Yeah, I'm working with my divine masculine now in a much bigger way. So I realized that I didn't have my biological father as present. So a part of my inner masculine has taken its time to mature. And so now I'm reconnecting with my past of India, which I kind of turned my back on for a while, which is that divine masculine energy, which, you know, in the tantric tradition is Shiva. And I've got this great painting with Shiva on his rock with the universe swirling around, just like in meditation, just observing this human experience. And for me, a big part of that consciousness energy is non-attachment. So I'm now looking in my life everywhere that I have placed my safety and my worth and my sense of feeling loved outside of myself. So I'm looking at the work that I'm doing, or, you know, all the different projects I'm going on, what serves, what doesn't serve, what relationships serve, don't serve, romantically, friendship. And like, I'm finally really going there. And where I'm at in my process is I'm ready to I'm ready to let go of everything. The job, the money, the relationship, my house I'm about to give up. My relationship, I am in the uncoupling process because I'm about to leave Bali. The work that I do is shifting and changing to be more in alignment with what my joy is rather than what I think I have to be doing. And I've never had the courage to really look at that at the level that I'm looking at now, because I feel like now in my life at 46, I don't want to be still in stress or still in overwhelm. And the only thing I haven't done is actually to take a pause. You know, I've been a creator my whole life. My human design is a generator, so I'm always doing. And now I'm just going, all right, if I'm to really be in integrity with what I'm teaching, then I need to look at this. I need to look at where is my attachment and where is my safety, my love and my worth. Still, I'm putting it on the external, whether it's through teachers, friends, a job title, a partner, and dissolving whatever whatever that energy is, and just this time not being pushed off the cliff, but hopefully kind of like glitter bombing, at least for a bit of it, off the cliff and being like, all right, you know what? I haven't trusted before. I've been on this spiritual path for a good while now. I really can just trust my body of what feels good and what no longer feels good. And I can trust what life is showing around me because I'm watching and seeing how things are playing out and being like, that's interesting. And then I'm really trusting spirit to say, all right, I'm aligning with my joy. I'm aligning with my truth. I'm aligning with believing in myself, trusting myself. So I'm listening. And I'm going to leap even though I have no fucking idea where I'm going to land. I'm going to trust that if I stay in alignment, it's going to work out just as well, if not better, than last time I leapt, but I got like booted off the cliff when I left my job, and then 3 days later started working with the Embodied Awakening Academy, completely unbeknownst to me. So let's see what this ego death and birth looks like.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to get to follow you during this. I'm curious.
Yeah, me too. Oh. This is now my accountability to follow through.
Yeah, exactly. This episode will come I don't know exactly what date yet, but in a few weeks, so you can follow up then and see how much
interesting,
how much glitter bombing happened.
Interesting.
Cool. So, final question: who do you think should be on the podcast?
I think it's always great to get a male's perspective, as well on Tantra. And the partner that I'm with now has just so much wisdom, like 30 years in this field. And that's what really drew me to him. One of the reasons was the level of wisdom that this man embodies, you know, in terms of how to love the feminine and how to do relationships. So I would suggest him. We did a live last week and it was fascinating. It was amazing.
Oh, wow, cool. I'll listen to the live that you did, and then I'll ask you for the contact details then.
I will. Shiva Rajaya is his name.
Oh, wow, that's a powerful name.
Yes.
Cool. Well, thank you, Tara, so much for being on the podcast. I learned so much, and it was so inspiring to have you here. So I hope to catch up with you sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks for the time and for the space to share. It was great.
Awesome.